would introduce Nimisha to pull us into why you guys are all here tonight to hear about these sustainable fashion brands.
Cool. So thank you everyone for being here today. I really appreciate it. This is the second one we're doing, so it's so nice to see a full room. So thank you so much. I'd also like to shout out that for all of you who are here today, we are going to be planting a tree for each one of you that's going to be here today. So thank you for contributing to that. So a little bit about me. I am what my friends call a serial entrepreneur. I run multiple businesses. I'm laughing as I say that because I'm like, why would you do that? That's just really painful. So the first one I actually started was a fashion brand, and it was actually inspired by this woman sitting here on the other side of the table. So in 2013, I joined a workshop where Paula was presenting about her brand and what she does. And it really inspired me to look at fashion in a very different way as a tool set to empower people, to create jobs, to effectively lift people out of their current situations or conditions. Paula's story is amazing, so I'll let you tell people about Mayamiko. But with us and how we started, my mom and I founded Mahira almost 6 years ago. We started off with what we knew best. We're Indian, so we made Indian clothes for Indian brides because that was the Indian thing to do, stick with what you know. But over time, we started to learn more about how our supply chain was functioning in India, where we were sourcing a lot of our fabrics from, and how we were achieving delivery of a product which actually was really not ethical, it wasn't sustainable, it was really marginalizing a lot of people who worked in the industry. And so in 2016, after kind of going through this experience of dealing with very painful brides, don't ever start a business dealing with brides. Like, it is, especially when it comes to their dress on the day, like you're literally on a noose most of the time. And so after doing that and kind of showing a lot of these women how we were working with very skilled craftsmen and seeing that the consumer didn't really appreciate that kind of skill set because they were more interested in price, we decided, well, actually, we're going to hold ourselves to a higher set of standards and actually build a business that is more sustainable, not just in the way that we produce the product, but also in what we use to produce the product. So we did 18 months of R&D research about what was the best sustainable material to use. We landed on something very controversial, which is hemp. So now all of our production is made solely from hemp-based materials. It's all made in India, and the reason that we specifically chose India is because the partner that we work with out there actually uses all of the funding generated from people like us who work with them to educate farmers to shift them away from cotton to hemp. Now, if many people know that like cotton is a very water-intensive material to grow, you have to grow one little stalk to get that tiny bulb of cotton out of it. But with hemp, you can have almost 17 different uses of the byproduct, let alone just the fabric. And it takes less water, it's antimicrobial, it doesn't require pesticides or herbicides. So from an environmental point of view, this was really a no-brainer for us as a fashion brand to build a very strong, sustainable supply chain. So yes, that's us in a nutshell, but I would love to kind of have Paula and Bazena share a little bit about their companies and what they do. And I just want to point out, these two women are women I really, really respect in what they do in their craft and how they have built these companies. They are really passionate about sustainability. You guys are such an inspiration to me and my team. I'm always pointing you out to them, so I'm really excited for you guys to share a bit about yourselves. So, Paula?
Cool. Hi everyone. First of all, congratulations on your brand.
Thank
I think
you.
using hemp is really brave because hemp is an amazing fiber, but I think it's got that stigma attached of being like
Yeah.
really kind of hippy-dippy, tree-hugging,
Yeah.
not very stylish clothing, and actually it's the complete opposite if you work it well, maybe like linen.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think it's a really good choice. So amazing. My name is Paola. I run a fashion label called Mayamiko, and also a charity called Mayamiko Trust. I used to introduce myself as someone who runs a sustainable or an ethical fashion label, and I decided not to do that anymore because that's my way of saying I want all fashion to be sustainable and ethical, and I don't want to kind of single it out. But also because for the longest time you had people saying, so are you ethical? Do you care about people? Or are you sustainable? Do you care about the planet? And for me that differentiation doesn't really make sense. If you care about people, then you care about the planet, and the other way around. So that concept of social and environmental justice, for me, you just can't disassociate it. So from now on, I'm going to choose myself as someone who runs a fashion label. a slightly unusual journey for me. I come from Italy, always enjoyed fashion, but never really saw it as a career. It was just like a thing that you did and that people around you did, and you know. For me, I always more cared about people, and my background is in international development, so I spent time working in Africa and sort of in a few countries, and particularly in Malawi, and ended up setting up a charity that was looking at women empowerment. And by empowerment, my interpretation of empowerment is giving people choices. And for me, in my life experience and my professional experience, choices come from education. So what the charity did was providing vocational skills and business and financial literacy skills to women. And at the end of their training courses, they could choose whether they wanted to remain with us and work in our workshop, or go on and set up their own businesses, in which case we would give them a grant and access to additional financial facilities to get themselves started, and we sort of then kept supporting them in whatever way worked for them, whether they wanted to work from home, whether they wanted to get together in small groups and small co-ops. So, you know, they called it, basically, that was the message. You know, we didn't call what was right for them. But even in saying that, there was a group of women that perhaps a bit younger, less family commitments, that did want to come to a workplace every day and wanted to kind of continue in their journey with us. And so we set up a workshop to produce fashion that I guess quite naively at the time we thought we could partner with international brands and just act as their production workshop, so produce their own designs. I think we underestimated a lot of the troubles with supply chain and kind of, you know, infrastructure constraints and all that kind of stuff. You know, what fabrics have you got available? You know, also the way that designers work and the timings of the collections wasn't really in tune with our pace. And so that was a really interesting experience. But then on the back of that, I ended up setting up our own label called My Amico, the label. And that's at that point when I was invited to run a workshop sort of to talk about my journey.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it sort of feels like a lifetime ago.
It's like 7 years ago, maybe,
So I suppose, like then, even now, we follow the same ethos. We employ largely women. We have a couple of men. You know, we love men, but you know, our mission is not a problem. But our mission is it's actually quite exciting to see men trying on, especially in an African context where roles are quite, you know, still quite differentiated. They sort of, you know, walk around the workshop trying on women's clothing just to kind of make sure that they fit correctly and that the measurements and sort of the make fits. So, but largely employ women, and I suppose in that sort of basic ethos, nothing has changed. So we employ them, you know, according to international standards. We pay them a fair wage. We pay them, you know, maternity leave, sick leave, you know, all the things that should be obvious, but actually are not really obvious in fashion or in a lot of the sort of fashion contexts that you see. And also we sort of really try and develop them as individuals, so whatever direction they want to take. If someone is more inclined to do quality control and quality assurance, that's the path that they take. If someone is more creatively inclined and wants to sort of try their hands at designing. So, I mean, it's small and it's almost like a big family. I mean, it's about the same size as my Italian family, so, which is big, but, you know, still not like massive. And then sort of bit by bit, we've chipped away at not all, as many as possible of the challenges that we found in fashion production. So, you know, one of the first steps was, can we make our workshop run powered by the sun? Yes, we can. So, you know, we'll do that. How can we reduce our cutting room waste? Okay, let's start thinking about the design first. Can I design waste out of my creation? And that's actually quite an interesting one, because in some ways it limits your creativity, because if you're trying to use every little bit of piece of fabric,
you have to cut it a different way.
And you can't go completely crazy and have like loads of very extravagant designs. But actually, it's a discipline that I found really useful, like for me, and just to really appreciate what goes into garment making and the waste that is created. And then okay, fine, maybe we can get down to, say, 95% fabric consumption. What can we do with that 5% that is left? Can we make jewellery? Can we bring in artisans that have used, ancient traditions to make jewellery to use that little bit of fabric left. Is there anything else the community needs? And then, for example, at that point, it was just a simple thing, but women said to us, our girls can't go to school when they've got their period because we don't have reusable pads available, or they are in the shops, so they're too expensive. So actually we thought, can we, with that fabric excess, make sanitary pads for girls? And actually, is there something there? Because you're turning them from something that has got stigma and shame associated to it to something that is actually funky and colourful and, you know, you want to talk about. I mean, again, it's quite interesting to begin with. No one really wanted to touch the pads. Like, I mean, you know, they're clean, they're just made.
Yeah,
but it was like that sort of idea of, oh, you know, I'm not really going to go there.
Yeah.
And now everyone sort of walks around the workshop and, you know, it's just amazing how the familiarity and actually talking about things and like doing them and making them part of your day-to-day shifts perspectives.
Yeah.
So, you know, so like that bit by bit we started chipping away at all the sort of, we looked at fashion as an ecosystem and we sort of said, okay, let's plot all the touch points and all the materials and all the people impacts and all whatever there are there. Can we do that? And then, you know, that extends to things like marketing. Can we do one collection a year? Can we design clothes that are intended to be worn in summer, but also layering up in winter so that you don't need
Like
to constantly
multi-season,
change up your wardrobe. So things like that. And then actually from a, you know, entrepreneurial perspective, is my business predicated around setting a high price point that then I need to discount?
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, the obvious answer is no, but most businesses are built around that. And can we actually make returns a little bit harder so people think a little bit longer about buying things rather than really pushing that instinctive fast buying? Because actually, even if you send it back to me, really sometimes I can't put it back for sale because you've put makeup on. I mean, inadvertently, but you know, it's really not a given that things that come back can go back for sale, or should go back for sale because they're not in the same kind of condition. So can we as a brand maybe grow a little slower but make better choices, you know, for, you know, everyone? So that's sort of been the journey. It's by no definition completed. I mean, never is. We're now, so part of our DNA are the local prints that we used to work with local artisan on, but actually they've got some issues around dyes and the sort of the process around them. So we're now trying to bring back other ancient traditions like using food waste for natural dyeing. Wow. So can we still maintain that DNA and that identity but do it better? And so for me, it's actually thinking about, you know, for quite a while now, we've considered sustainable or ethical fashion something that minimizes the negative impact. And now, actually, I think, like really forward-thinking entrepreneurs are starting to think, how can I be regenerative in my work? Exactly. How can I not just minimize the shitty things that I do, but actually maximize the really positive impact on people and on the environment? Yeah. So, that's us.
Thank you. No worries. Bozena?
Okay, hi everybody, good evening. So my name is Bożena Jankowska. I know a name that does not roll off the tongue easily and probably is very easily forgettable too, which, for that reason, it's not easy to remember. But I'm originally Polish, as you may have guessed from the name. I moved to England in 1980, so I've been here for quite a while. But my passion and how I ended up in fashion has been a bit of a convoluted journey, so to speak. I've always been passionate about the whole topic of sustainability, starting off with the McDonald's, if you like, protest about rainforest destruction. This is before even the internet was there, and you had Greenpeace handing out leaflets, and that's where it all started. Vanessa, I wrote for my English O-level to basically, you know, do a kind of editorial piece. Anyway, so that's where it all kind of kicked off for me. So my career has always been focusing on the whole topic of sustainability. I've got an environmental science degree. I've got a master's in environmental technology. I worked in sustainable finance for 16 years, investing and driving changes within the investment world to take on the whole topic of climate change, looking to invest in companies which have got the best environmental and social practices. I led a global team of 8 spread across Europe, Asia, the US. where we basically conducted research on listed companies, looking at their sustainability reports, talking to them, engaging with them on topics, and pushing them towards being better, if you like, global citizens and doing better in the whole concept of sustainability. So I learned quite a lot from the kind of corporate side, what it means for companies. And I guess when I first entered the sector, the sustainability sector, it was still very much a marginalized activity, especially in the world of finance. At that time when I first entered, it was called ethical investing. So the only things that were really that people or investors really focused on is all the sin stocks, no tobacco, pornography, alcohol. Then that progressed towards looking at the more holistic approach of sustainability, the triple bottom line. And that's really what I was involved in pioneering in the industry. As one of the one of the first implementers of best practices, methodologies to evaluate companies, which we rolled out globally across my old firm when I was working in the city. I also had the opportunity to run a $1 billion fund focusing on clean technologies, looking at water, air pollution, renewable energies. So I had the opportunity to see quite a lot in terms of how these technologies are developed. Quite interesting trips into the depths of China, looking at polysilicon factories and the huge amount of energy intensity that requires, manufacturers of wind turbines and what that entails. So it was very much an eye-opener, and again, just even more insight into how, you know, there's this constant balance being struck between trying to do well, but also there's also compromise in terms of the impact that has on the environment. In 2016, I decided to change career. I've always been interested in fashion, and I used to make my own clothes. And so I decided to leave the city to pursue and set up my own sustainability-focused label. I entered the industry knowing nothing about fashion, so it was very much starting from ground zero and researching everything for myself from scratch. And it was an interesting journey, as not only did I have to put into place my own supply chains, I had to look at all my own sourcing of fabrics, and just talking to a lot of people along the way to try and get myself informed. And again, when I first started the label in 2017, in fact, I realized how the talk around the availability of sustainable fabrics, particularly to smaller brands, is such a high barrier to entry. I visited all of the big fabric fairs. Premier Vision is one of the biggest in Paris, held twice a year. And when I spoke to the fabric manufacturers, their eyes either glazed over, or it was so prohibitively expensive, or the volumes that required were so huge that for a small brand was just inaccessible. But what also highlighted to me is how, obviously for obvious reasons and economies of scale, for obvious reasons, how the industry is still structured to just produce, and produce tons of it. I mean, you know, just it's just a very simple thing. As you would go to a fabric supplier looking to source, let's say, sustainable closed-loop viscose. As you know, viscose is quite environmentally damaging fibre or material, and they wanted minimum of 50 meters, and that's just for sampling. What they mean by sampling is, as a brand, you just produce the prototypes, and they need 50. You need to buy a minimum of 50 meters of that, let alone production volumes, which you're running into hundreds of meters.
And you're probably likely to use 2 or 3 meters of that 50
per garment. So, you know, so I've experimented with different fabrics, different approaches, and so when I first launched my label, it was very much of the intention to use fashion as a way to communicate key sustainability challenges that we face. So, for example, my first collection was a small capsule collection focusing on tops, trousers, skirts, etc., blouses, and it was with the aim of forming a strategic partnership with a non-governmental organisation, whereby it was in this case it's called Bug Life, and they did quite a lot of really good work, and the biggest organisation actually in Europe, which look at bee conservation. As you're probably aware, there's a whole bunch of issues going around with bees, etc., and use of pesticides, climate change, etc., etc. So every percentage of sale would go to this organisation from whatever I sold. But I soon realised that what I was doing in terms of producing capsule collections really wasn't a sustainable thing going forward, because again, what I found is that customers were not really ready. What I was aiming to do is only produce when garments were wanted, not producing for the sake of producing.
Yeah.
And a lot of customers are not ready for that. They're not ready to wait. They want it here and now, walk out of the shop, and that's it, which is
Yeah.
which is the ongoing challenge around. I know there's more brands now looking to do made to order, but it's a very, very difficult thing for a lot of consumers to get over in their head because they're used to immediacy. It's like, we want it now, we want to walk out of it, and that's it. I don't want to
Yeah.
think about it. So it's something that I had to then streamline, which is which is the best thing about being, a small business. You call the shots. So I completely rethought my business, and I completely then moved it to slimline it to only focusing on just one product and doing it exceptionally well and just developing it and just refining it and then eventually maybe rolling out, but still keeping this concept of slow fashion, sustainable fashion, focusing on using fabrics which are dead stock fabrics. Now I know there's a whole bunch of discussions separate to the sustainability of dead stock fabrics, which I'm happy to have. But this is my way of, if you like, trying to minimize my environmental footprint in terms of using what's already available, produce very limited edition, which I hope support the whole principle of slow fashion. They are perhaps more expensive than most because I call them as investment pieces. But when you think of all the costs associated with producing on such a small scale, paying fair wages, that all, adds up.
And I love that you said that, because that's also like a philosophy we follow as well, where I think I was telling someone in the audience that my production team in India, when we were sourcing our hemp, would keep saying to me, buy it from China, it's cheaper. And I'm like, yeah, I know everything is cheaper in China, but that's not the point of this exercise. And there's also like a psychological shift that also has to take place in the people who are involved in this industry, whether they're the patent cutters or the production unit, to like shift away from expecting a small designer to buy a 50-meter roll, or from our point of view, to keep pushing us to source a cheaper fabric just because it's cheaper. It's like, cheaper doesn't always mean that it's better. We know this.
Yeah.
But more importantly, what we push, and that's why I love what you do, is we produce items for a heritage purpose. Like if you think back 100 years ago, when we would source clothing, it would be made for us. It would be made to order. You'd buy it in bunches, like you said, capsule collection, which is why I'd love for that to take off, but I know that resistance, it's hard. But also, we would pass things down. Like I have so many saris and amazing like fabrics from my grandma, which are like 150 years old, because there was this philosophy of treating fashion like it was an investment piece that you would pass it on generation to generation.
And
There's
the
an
emotional
heritage.
value
Exactly,
as well,
yeah.
like the memories you make with
The
clothes
heritage
and,
of it, yeah. So,
absolutely.
no, but
This is what. So now what I'm doing is focusing on just doing women's tailoring. So the principle behind that is that you are brought into the design process. You personalize your own blazer. You choose what fabric you want to use for your blazer, what buttons you want to use. I tend to try and source vintage buttons as well. Sometimes I only have enough to make one blazer with that particular button that you choose. So to your point, it's really, you've got a personal connection to it. There's a
Exactly.
story behind it. And I'm hoping that with the quality and the high quality manufacturers that I'm using in London and in Europe, you end up with a beautiful piece that will hopefully become a vintage piece
Yeah,
down the road.
exactly,
That's my
yeah.
hope. So it gets that 30 wears plus.
oh my God, I
down-
love your
down-
jackets.
down-
You guys
down
should
the
check
road.
them out,
So,
yeah.
yes, is that, and it's again another discussion that could be had. We could be here all night about price points of sustainable fashion, and it's something I grapple with, and I'm trying to. I don't know what the answer to that is in terms of the price point, the fact that it is expensive and it's unaffordable to the majority of
Yeah.
public, particularly younger people perhaps
Yeah.
don't have such a high disposable income. So that's, again, I would love to hear what people's thoughts are on this particular topic, because it's something I'm always trying to find a solution to or have a debate about and just get additional insights.
So you teed that up perfectly. Ben, do you want to open it up for Q&A? So we're here. We're at your disposal. Feel free to ask us any questions. Ben is going to pass the mic around. So anyone have a question? Show of
Put your
hand.
hands up if you have a
Who's going to be the
question,
first
and
person? James.
So,
we'll check if that's on first.
Okay.
No.
Alright, anyway, you don't need the mic.
No.
Shout out
Okay.
louder.
So, So, the triple bottom.
Triple bottom line.
Yeah. What is that?
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Again, I take
like
for
that.
granted that people know what it is because from my background. So the triple bottom line was a phrase that was termed, I would say, probably in the early 2000s, and it's basically the whole principle of sustainability. So economics, environment, and society, bringing them together into balance. Basically, that's what the triple bottom line is.
It's people, profit, and planet.
Yeah.
You normally hear it.
Profit,
Yeah, the
planet.
3 Ps,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Because it used to be people and profit, and then the third one got added as the
It was
planet.
just profit.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
it was just
profit,
profit.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's progress.
Slowly, yeah.
Thank you.
Next question. So many shy people. Go for it. Yeah.
Paolo, you built an amazing kind of supply chain. How do you deal with the need to be a successful brand at the same time as keeping your kind of supply chain busy?
Yeah.
So you've kind of got this responsibility now.
Yeah, so we have a nice problem, which is we always have more customers than products. So I'm not sure, again, like it makes complete marketing sense, but it sort of makes sense for us. I mean, I think, just your point, Jana, I think I agree that customers need to be educated around sort of shifting away from that immediate need, which is, you know, is it a want or is it a need, you know, whatever. But we've experimented with pre-orders, which have helped us manage fabrics and timings and, you know, not having like peaks and troughs and that kind of stuff. And actually, if you educate customers, you know, our experience has been that they respond. So there's a sweet spot. You have to experiment. You know, people don't like waiting more than 3-4 weeks for something that they want. Feels like a month or like a payday sort of cycle is about what people are happy to wait. But actually for us, because we control our entire supply chain, that's kind of enough. So, you know, you kind of get smart about these things and you test things. You know, I mean, like any entrepreneur, you sort of take a small sample and try it out and sort of try to minimize in case it all goes pear-shaped. But if it does go right, then you can scale it. So it's through lots of experimentation, working with our customers on like pre-orders and timelines, educating people on the fact that we will do drops, but they come at a regular interval, so you kind of know that it's coming. You know, our loyal customers know that there's a pattern and a rhythm.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's also around that, I mean, that honest, it's not that false sense of urgency that once it's gone, but actually it's educating people on the fact that if you do like something and you really, really like and you really thought about it, then you should get it now because it will not be there forever. It's just our business model. You know, that same fabric, the same pattern will not come back. And so slowly people have started to adjust to that idea. And so they really just buy things that they love. I mean, our returns rates are like 2%, and it's mostly down to sizing.
Yeah.
So we now partner with an AI company out of Cambridge that does you know, sort of AI enhanced sizing, because, you know, that was the one thing that you just can't, you know, bodies work differently.
Of
There's
course,
all of that. So you can't really completely work that out of your system. But, you know, it's actually really low because I think customers, I mean, you know, you put in that extra little bit with your customer and say, I don't mind answering your question, I don't mind helping you out, as long as I know that you get something that you really want. And that sort of has kind of worked out. But you need to be at peace with yourself that you will not grow as fast as the brand down the road. And if you live in a world where people consider speed and scale as the two success factors, you need to build that sort of shell around you that goes like, I'm not going to be measured by that. I'm not going to let there be a value judgment of, you know, how successful I am, which is kind of hard, right? Because that's, you know, we went for investment a couple of times and I decided, no, because however impact the investor was, the returns that they expected were not allowing us to keep going the same way that we needed to keep going to stay true to our values. Which is not to say that we can't do things better. We can, but for me, it was more like we still, for better or worse, you know, you come from finance. I worked in finance. Live in a world where scale and volume are the measures of success.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And if you're playing in that game, it's very hard to kind of stay true to your values. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
I mean, it's something like we even have addressed in our own supply chain. So when we look at producing a unit of a garment, we will only lock it down at a certain number. And we won't produce beyond that. Not because we don't want the customer to have the product, but we also want to instill a different buying psychology in our customer.
Exactly.
So in other words, when we produce a piece, there will only be 50 pieces
Yeah.
of that. There won't be any more after
I'll
that.
just give you an example that was painful. So, as in, like really pain, you'll empathise in a second. So, we had the good fortunes in September of having Meghan Markle wear one of our dresses when she did.
That was so exciting.
Didn't know it's coming, completely unprepared for it. But still very grateful. I'm prepared to an extent that literally all we had was 7 dresses. I mean, we could have sold 5,000 easily, and actually it was really interesting for me to kind of go through all that process, because quite quickly you go like, okay, I've got at least 5,000 people that want that dress right now. The halo effect is going to carry on. I can actually take that bit of fabric that I've got left, go to a manufacturer and quite easily get another 10,000 meters of the same fabric made. I can sell those dresses and I can, sort out all my budget issues for like 2020 and you go on holiday and be happy. And actually, for better or worse, you can sort of tell me all that I'm the worst entrepreneur on earth, but I decided not to do that because that for me compromised too much on our values, but it was fucking painful.
Do we have a question?
Yeah, so I do have a question. I apologise profusely for being late, I'm so sorry. So this may have been sort of covered already. But you say, I mean, I've got so many questions around sort of buyer behaviour.
Yeah.
Right? So you say you're educating the customers. So my question is, how are you educating them, and who are your customers? Because surely we need to essentially educate the Primark buyers.
Yes.
And if
Like my mum.
So that's sort of one question. How do you do that? Because that is what's necessary.
Yeah.
The people who are buying the high end, of your label, they're already educated. You're preaching to the converted there, in a sense.
Sorry, yeah.
But another sort of part of the question is, in the Meghan Markle sort of scenario, if your whole sort of production line is all sustainable, so the only...
It's not, but yeah.
Right, okay. So my question was, could you not then have produced those 5,000 if those 5,000 had been ethically produced?
But that's the counter argument, right? Is that to produce that 5,000 in that short period of time, it goes completely against the integrity of what we have built as brands, because Meghan Markle loved that garment because of the ethos behind which it was built.
So
if we were to walk,
being slow fashion.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Paula, but I think that's the reason.
There is
yeah.
an element of that. So
Yeah.
I think, to respond with that speed, we couldn't have supported that, and the fabric makers that we work with couldn't have supported that. So you would have inevitably had to go to a larger manufacturer and, and establish it.
couldn't have done
No, we couldn't. I mean, we could have, yeah, if we wanted. No, yeah, exactly. And I think maybe we could have if we had lined up large-scale manufacturers that do things really well, but I haven't got them on my, like speed dial, because they're far and few in between. And actually, they're getting more, but not to an extent that I can just pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, stop everything. Can you do 5,000 meters for me?
Well, so the question sort of remains,
yeah.
How are we educating
So
the Primark buyers, the
yeah.
Asian buyers, the fast fashion?
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what fashion is.
Well, that's what fashion has been in the last
is
20
very
years.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree on the point that we need to educate, and I also do agree on the point that we often have a talk to the bubble type approach. So, we like to talk to people who, yeah, exactly, that kind of, and you end up, so you have to be inclusive and you have to talk to the non-bubble. I just want to dispel the myth that we're an expensive label. The dress that we talked about was £70, which I'm not saying is cheap, but it wasn't, at that price point. It's comparable to most high street products. So I don't want to minimize that price point, but I just want to say it wasn't a 500.
7,000.
Yeah, exactly. So I think from our point of view, we've tried to be inclusive from a pricing perspective, so that people that, have a viable option of, not to single out any brands, but any other brand that you can think of from the high street where you're not really sure what the ethics and background is, and then ask, then it's not that, oh, can I afford it? But it's actually more of an easier choice, an easier switch. we've also, I mean, it's interesting because one of the things we've played around with is adopting methods like Afterpay or Klarna to help people spread the payment. But actually, I decided against it because from my research, there's actually quite a lot of complexities around creating, unhealthier habits and debt for people, and that then set people up for not good things in life. So you sort of constantly try and push yourself to like not be talking to the bubble. You go to events where not everyone looks like you, not everyone thinks like you, not everyone sort of agrees with you, and then you get that message out. And then, I mean, we've got this Love It or Rate It social media. It can help you reach audiences, collaborating with people that have got a different voice to yours, that can share the message. And actually, you can have that healthy, not always agreeing conversation that says, here's what I think. And they go like, oh, is that how I see it? And you kind of, so it's not easy and it takes a long time. But I do think that it is, I mean, now I sound like an old lady, but, it really has changed very much in the last 25 years. Like, fast fashion, I look at my niece now in Italy, like she sort of loves H&M and all that kind of stuff. But when I grew up, there were only like little shop boutiques and shops, and you saw something in the window and you saw it for 3 weeks and you saved up for it. And then, do you know what I mean? It really isn't that long ago that change has happened in such a massive way.
Sorry, I'm hogging now, but I've got you now. And is there do you sense that there is something happening with your, sorry, keep going with Primark and, I mean, H&M, you got your sustainable cotton or whatever.
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
Moron, but, exactly. But, is there a collaboration in mind with them? Do you think that is going to happen?
I mean, there's a lot happening. I think there's a lot of fear by big brands that if they put themselves out there, especially we live in a call-out culture. And I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's a bit of fear around if I put myself out there, I'll be stoned to death because I'm not doing it 100% right.
We're shit scared of that. Like, we're so scared of going out and saying we're a hemp-based luxury fashion brand because we don't know how people will respond to that.
So I think there is definitely that, but there's a lot of goodness happening in the industry. So yes, there is a lot of greenwashing. Yeah, I am hopeful.
But that's super important. Do you genuinely feel hopeful?
I mean, look, otherwise I'd be like.
But I think it's important. I think it's important to stress this point as well, that we as entrepreneurs collectively need to also develop a generational understanding of who is our client, right? So like right now, it's generally baby boomers and your millennials. But in like 5 years' time, it will be Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and they think absolutely differently, Like, I'll give you a very simple anecdote based on some of the AI work I do, that in the AI space, some of the scientists who work on like observing the internet when Gen Alpha responds versus Gen Z or baby boomers, when WhatsApp was bought out by Facebook, they saw this interesting pattern in the AI that they watch, where everyone who is millennial below was freaking out, going, oh my God, WhatsApp's been bought by Facebook, we're all going to be bought out by a big behemoth, but nobody was doing anything about it. But everyone who was Gen Z and below had already found the alternative, whether it was a Snapchat or Instagram, and moved off it within 24 hours. These generations below are not validated by what external factors influence them. They care about a principle, like the Gretas of the world. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Microsoft or Google. Do you uphold to a certain set of standards? If you do, you can have my money. And that is such an interesting shift for this whole context of sustainability, where our actual consumer is different.
Yeah.
They are a sustainably conscious consumer.
The business model needs to change as
Yes.
well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's still
Yeah,
stuck.
100%.
Very much.
Yeah,
It's the Titanic trying to turn.
exactly.
Doing a very bad job at it. I mean, the iceberg is looming. We're within touching distance.
We're already grazing it as we go
but there are,
along.
But I think that's something when you talked about how to get payments from your clientele, and you were talking about crossing it. It's something, again, it's about changing the mentality of what you're buying. In the same way that you're talking about, you're frightened of letting people know it's hemp, but if people have that education before they even buy it, of what a good, this is what needs to be in the press, not,
But that's the
all the
challenge.
other
It has to be a
things.
meeting of minds, right? Like it has to come together. So as much as that we have to purport the narrative of why it's better. I mean, we've chosen not to actually use hemp in any of our marketing. We let them think it's polyester or chiffon or whatever. It will be just a buy, aha, wow, it's hemp. This is so, but that's what we've chosen to do because we would rather invest the money in actually getting them consume the product because it looks similar as opposed to just being a system. Because then there's the whole element of, are you greenwashing your business? How much of it is sustainable? Maybe, and then you get a lot of that. We know how sustainable it is, but we just don't need to go on this war with the consumer to get them to understand that. So we
Seems very similar to what Paula says of not wanting to introduce yourself as a sustainable fashion brand. You don't want to introduce yourself as a sustainable fashion product. I want you to buy it because you like it. It
Yeah.
just happens to be sustainable.
But I agree with what, and
No,
I
I
agree with
agree.
you,
This
right?
is
Because
better.
like that whole element of marketing products as sustainable is where the greenwashing starts, right? All products should be sustainable. All
Yeah.
businesses
Exactly.
should be sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I remember someone once used an analogy and sort of talked about hygiene as a comparative. 100 years ago, you went into factories and the hygienic conditions were like shocking and appalling. And then actually you had a systemic movement and there was regulation, there was civil, unrest, there were protests, there were, just science progressing. And so it was like, it's a system change
Yeah,
and it needs to
massively.
come in from a lot of different directions. So consumer pressure, brands doing the right thing, big corporates actually holding their hands up saying what we've done so far, could be done better. Legislators coming in and saying actually we need to, polluters pay principle needs to be kind of implemented or whatever, might be that answer. You kind of need that system level approach. And you need that collaboration and that community where everyone sort of says, okay, that's the goal, I contribute this bit and I can influence this bit and, let's see how together we can, do it. Like, it's interesting for me, sometimes I hear sort of people saying, renting is the future, no, secondhand is the future, sustainable is the future. And I'm actually, no, these
all
are all
the future.
expressions
Yeah.
of the future.
Yeah.
And everyone is free to make that future whatever feels right. But actually, you need all of those things. And you need all of that coming together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not easy because we still live in a larger
Competitive
capitalistic
world, yeah.
society where actually...
this is one of the biggest things we teach in our Fashion Accelerator, which is that if you're going to win the game of growth in terms of investment and actual valuation of your company, you can't just be competitive. You have to be collaborative. Because it doesn't make sense for me and 10 other fashion brands to push the hemp agenda. It makes more sense for one to push the linen, one to push the hemp, one to push the organic cotton, because like you said, they all have a role to play. For us, fundamentally, we never started off this pivot when we changed 2 years ago to be like, we're going to be the only hemp brand and we're going to have our own vertical supply chain. Nobody, we're good. No, because that just doesn't work. I mean, just think of, from a sustainability point of view, the replication of resources for all of you to try and achieve the same thing just doesn't make sense. So it just makes more sense to actually, as businesses and entrepreneurs, and particularly fashion brands, we're doing that already, but to be more collaborative, like how can we all work together? If someone's great at doing the production in Malawi, then who's great at doing, the designing in Paris or whatever? But like, how can we all work together as an ecosystem rather than being competitive and trying to do this all on our own?
With the fashion industry's so secretive,
Exactly,
It's a little
yeah.
black book.
Yeah.
That people are so guarded with their lives, really. Whether it's you find a great supplier of something or manufacturer that does amazing, you don't want to share with anybody else, and it's just trying to get over that mindset.
We
actually
used to
is
see
quite
this-
tricky.
Clearly, because no one manufactures it themselves. Yeah,
Exactly.
I came from a manufacturing background in automotive, but as soon as every car company doesn't make anything themselves,
There you
then
go.
you're very protective of
Yeah.
it. If you
Yeah.
actually
Exactly.
make it yourself and
You
manage your
wouldn't
own
care.
supply chain, you don't care. You tell everyone, hey, I make it, come and make it with me.
Yeah, I mean, we used to see that when we used to make bridal wear all the time, because we'd go to Mumbai or wherever and be like, look, we want to meet some great craftsmen who do a certain type of embroidery that we know the regular person doesn't do. Nope, we're not going to tell you. I'm like, well, why? You're actually going to get work from this. No, because then you'll come and learn from us. I'm like, I am not going to come there and learn personally how you do this. But you're right. We also have to shift internally as designers. Actually, it's a big call to all of us as people who run fashion brands or as designers to promote this collaboration agenda more than trying to be vertically competitive.
I was going to ask you guys how, like with whatever it is, 7 billion, 10 billion, 11 billion and growing population, supplying one jacket and 50 dresses sustainably. Bless you know, it's obviously not a future solution.
Yeah.
How do you see that that's going to happen? Is it through collaboration of lots of smaller brands? Is it that big brands are going to develop, and then how are you going to scale and compete with them? Or will you be pushed out the market? Or how do we take 11 billion people wearing sustainable clothing?
I mean, I think it is a systems approach. You need a lot of players coming together. You need the government. You know, there was a series of recommendations that came out, I think, in June to the British government around how can we clean up the fashion sort of industry and supply chain, and every single one was rejected by the government. So
because
you know,
it doesn't make them money.
You know, you need and lobbying and you know that kind of stuff. So you need all of that to come together. So obviously, I'm not going to change the world on my own. I mean, obviously, so I think it's an interesting one because I think that's a conversation that comes up in finance quite a bit around the big investment houses and the big asset managers. You know, you need to pressure them to shift.
It was interesting to see what's happened. What I observed when I was in finance is that it was just like the fashion industry, very secretive. We're not going to tell you, tell you what we do, blah, blah, blah. And then over time, there have been various collaborations where interested parties, for example, when I started, it was ethical investing. But then that grew to several $1 trillion under management on a global basis, and it continues to grow on a day-to-day basis. There's a huge demand for sustainability professionals in finance at the moment, which is really interesting to show how this is growing. But the point I was trying to make is that there was a level of secrecy to begin with, but then there were various number of initiatives that were being launched, whether it's around collaboration around climate change. You've got the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, which is an industry collaborative process working on different work streams, whether it's supply chain, SDGs, and all those kind of components. So, you know, I think it's just the people recognizing that you've got to come together. And as to when that's going to happen for the fashion industry, that's kind of happening up to a point. You know, you've got the Fashion Roundtable, which is UK-based organisation. You've got the Helen MacArthur Foundation, which produces various reports. So there are pockets of collaboration and good practice and suggestions and solutions coming out. Not to solve the 7 billion, 8 billion plus population problem, which fashion cannot do on its own, but it's going to be a process. I think it's going to be a journey.
I think you need pressure from a lot of sides. I mean, you need government, you need kind of civil society. I mean, you need the likes of Extinction Rebellion making the noise and actually disrupting London Fashion Week, which is obviously a highly controversial thing because it's also where a lot of the creative thinking comes out of. But, so you really need everyone to come together with what they've got to give and then organise around topics or areas, legislation, business practices, business models, material, biofabrications. This is kind of stuff that happens in labs with serious, PhDs cooking up amazing fabrication. So it's like you kind of need all of that to come together. And I do think it's happening. It's slow, and you've got that push and pull because a lot of the world is still. And this is not to have a dig at social media. I think social media is a massive power for good. But, you have this culture where a new outfit every day it's celebrated. And, you can't be seen in the same picture, in a picture with the same outfit twice. And so you've got that force to contend with at the same time.
But I think even the whole kind of influencer landscape is already
changing,
starting to change
massively.
A lot. And I think because now with the, younger generations, I think they're becoming less...
Yeah, they're more
people want more authenticity rather than staged.
And I think I love that you raised that question because for us, when we work on the marketing of our brand, our biggest anchor point for how we market is the education and shift of psychology. So as much as there's so many players that have to come into the mix, government has to do better legislation. Like, it's really easy to implement legislation to say that no clothing should ever go to landfill, that it has to be part of a closed loop system where it goes into other purposes. The same way that we have started doing it or in the 50s, what we did with coal. you never have waste coal. You recombust it and reburn
had
it,
to do it
and,
with
and we had to
cars
do it
10 years ago,
exactly.
yeah?
But that's my point. Every single item has a post-use purpose, and I think for me, there's two massive levers around the 11 billion people, or however many we end up being, unless we all die. But like, you know, it's us as a consumer. That is my biggest philosophy. We have to change. We have to decide that I'm going to consume better across the board. I'm not going to buy as many clothes. Like, my husband laughs at me now. He's like, oh my God, I do not see any like ASOS and Next and all this crap coming in for the last year, sweetheart. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm like choosing better. And it's like, it sounds really obvious, but it's really tough. We live in a social media world where validation is the biggest precursor to us, and we receive that from social media. So I think ultimately, as designers or as entrepreneurs, we have to educate the consumer into buy less and buy for longer and buy to last and buy for heritage and buy for gift, as opposed to just pushing this agenda of buy for season on season. And so like for us, even when we design, we're not going to design for season. We're going to design for utility. That's our design principle. So that shirt that we design may be designed again and again in a different color, but it's a utility item. It's not a designer piece. So there's different ways to slice this, but I'm conscious we're running out of time. Right, so as I said earlier on tonight, first of all of you, thank you so much for coming here. So just a quick intro into kind of what we do with the school. The Legacy Business School and the way we run these incubators and accelerators is that we're a community interest company. So does anybody know what a community interest company is?
Yeah, we are one.
Fantastic. So as you know, we're mandated to reinvest a lot of the profit we make as a company into community causes. So the Legacy Business School is governed by our CIC. We use the money that we make from educating entrepreneurs, like we would at this next accelerator, to go into community-based projects. For us, that is planting trees, cleaning up the oceans, and saving species. So all of you here tonight, through your tickets purchase, we've been able to plant 1 tree for each of you in Britain. And our goal as a community interest company is to plant 1.5 billion trees in Britain by 2050 to help curb climate change. James freaks out when I say that because he's like, I don't even know if there's enough land to plant 1.5 billion trees. But I want to introduce you very quickly to James, who is our tree planting partner. Come on up here. And I just want him to share a little bit about Gone West and what their mission is and how they support us in these endeavors. So over to you.
Thanks, Namisha. Thank you. Hello, guys. Yeah, I'm James. Basically, I've been planting trees for 10 years. I've planted trees for 5 years. I learned the trades of planting. Then I started my own company, Gone West. It's called, the website's www.gonewest.com. We've actually got a Seeders campaign on right now. We're raising investment. It's www.seeders.com/gonewest. Should put that at the end, but you know, I'll just throw it in there now. Basically, myself, I've planted around 1 million trees, and altogether. So basically, and altogether, we've planted 4 million trees.
As a company.
As a company. So across, there's 130 guys who've worked for us. We've created jobs for 130 people. And we've planted, 4 million trees across a variety of different countries, principally UK, Ireland and Portugal, but some smaller projects around the world, like on every continent kind of thing. And I met Namisha about 5 months ago at the incubator. And Namisha's been sort of helping me along to try and, with the Legacy Business School, helping me along to try and get into more of the CSR realm. And basically, we're trying to offer innovative B2C solutions for our B2B partners. So basically, if any of you are business owners in here, I can offer you a really nice, innovative CSR solution.
So what James is saying is that, you know, a big part of what Gone West is offering is the ability for you as a business to offset your carbon footprint through tree planting. That's what we're working together on, James and I. So obviously, if you know, many of you are running businesses, if you're interested in kind of looking at how you can offset a lot of the carbon emissions, whether it's to date of operation or going forward, reach out to me or James. We have a kind of process in place where we'll help you understand what is your emissions to date, and then how Gone West can help you offset it with tree planting. So thank you, James. We've planted.
Thanks very much. Thanks, ladies. Really interesting stuff. I'll just get back there now.
But yeah, thank you everyone, and I'll hand back to Susan.
Thank you guys. Really, really inspiring, really impressive. Where can we follow you guys? So what platform are you on? Because love or hate it, social media can do that much good. I would also encourage you all, Nimisha actually runs a hub on Eugenie for people who are interested in all of these innovative topics. If you want to be invited to that, we can send that out. You can join it, connect with our experts, connect with the other things that Nimisha is doing herself. It's just a big group learning hub. So what we'll do is, as a follow-up tonight, we'll send out everyone's information where you can follow them, an invitation to join the community at the Legacy Business School, if that's okay.
And also an invitation to James's Cedars campaign. If you guys are interested in investing in his company, they plant a tree for every £1 that's invested.
So for every £10 invested.
I've got
sorry.
5. Somebody donated £5.
Oh wow!
So
Give it
someone
to.
who buy a ticket that actually gave us the £5. So.
Okay, thank you.
But I think there were so many good things that you guys took away that you said tonight. I tried to take a couple of tidbits, and I think so many good things. But I love the fact that it's not minimizing the negative, but actually enhancing the positive. I think that was a big shift, and that was an amazing thing that you said. Reducing the entry to barrier for small brands is going to make us make a bigger impact. Educating brands on how to be profitable and sustainable and ethical. But I think what I like about you is that you're just trying to make it the norm. You're not even saying buy this because this is awesome. So my 2 calls to action tonight to be sustainable is drink all the wine because you can't leave it behind. It will go to waste, and so I need you to drink it. If it's not open, we can save it for next time. But
Or you can drink it
the wine
tonight.
they don't keep. So please eat all the food and. Ultimately, we can all do this collectively, whether we're fashion brands or not. It's all about collaboration. Again, we're a tech platform putting on an event with these, we have nothing to do with fashion. This is the same black dress I wear, and I just changed the blazer. So that, I guess, is my sustainability.
There you
I've
go.
had it for 5 years, but a little black,
30
black
West
dress.
Plus, right?
Huh? Sorry?
30 West Plus.
Yeah, it's perfect. I'll just change my blazer.
Yeah.
The shoes are the same. I also buy the same pair of shoes if I like them, like in four different colors. But, so I'm all about the classic. I used to be a lot more about, people can't see me in this weekend. But now I'm like, where's my mom's old, and it's classic now. It's about changing the culture collectively. Thank you guys all so much for coming. Please connect with our experts. I know there's a lot of networking yet to be had. Thanks again to the First for Freelancers and Few for having us tonight. And cheers.
And a big thank you to Susan and Faim for always being great facilitators. So thank you.
One of the things that one of you said about your men prancing around the warehouse, I was like, maybe I can Faim to you. We do a lot of community-based theater, and he always ends up being the person they want to make the woman. And actually, yesterday we're bridesmaids and part of a bridal party in a wedding coming up soon, and they needed someone to be the woman. And again, they're going to have fun. So he's very.
It's a great skill to have.
Great skill. Yes.
Tall and lean. So,
perfect.
But anyway, thank you guys so much again. We hope to see you at an event soon.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.